From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello and welcome to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Indiana Issues, the program where we talk about issues here in the state of Indiana. And our guests today are Republican Pete Tew, Democrat Kip Tew, and Brad Klopfenstein of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. We've been polling lately, and so we've got lots of things to get to. Going to spend the entire program kind of walking through those poll numbers. And our first poll, which was done by Indy Politics, which is our website, and Change Research, surveyed 1,033 Hoosiers and had a margin of error of about 3.1%. And in the first set of polling, gentlemen, we start today's program in our presidential poll. Donald Trump, as you can see on the numbers there on the big screen, right now, Donald Trump at 53%, Joe Biden at 39%. Back in April, really not much of a change. Donald Trump 52, Joe Biden 39. Kip, let's start with you. Do these numbers shock you or surprise you in any way?
They're a little higher than what I've seen in internal polling and what I've heard from other people's internal polling. So I'm not convinced that's where the race is in Indiana at the moment. Could be an outlier poll. I'm not that familiar with Change Research polling site. Do they do it via internet?
Yeah,
is that what I understand?
Online, yeah.
Yeah, and it may end up being a right on, but it's not usually the method that I see used by pollsters. They do a combination of things that may account for it, or it may be where the race is, and everything else I've heard is way off. But I think Donald Trump is in position to win in Indiana, although I don't think he should. He's certainly not as popular as he was 2 and 4 years ago in the state of Indiana.
Pete, let's jump over to you here, my friend. I know you had some issues with our polling, which we talked about on another television program. But what do you think right now of the Donald Trump numbers?
Yeah, just a few issues, Abdul, and I'm sure we'll get into that when we talk about the governor's race. And I'll educate Kip on what Change Research actually is. But I think the presidential race numbers are relatively consistent with what I have seen privately from pollsters that I've worked with, people I trust, people I would place bets on if I had that kind of discretionary income to place bets on their polling. But I think these are pretty darn close. Obviously there has been some attrition since 2016, as Kip indicated. I don't expect the president to win this state again by 19 points. But I don't think he has anything to worry about in the state of Indiana. We're not a place where he needs to spend money unless, as we get into the home stretch of this campaign, it makes sense to try and drive up the base in some targeted areas to help some vulnerable incumbents or challengers get across the finish line. The one thing I do want to point out, though, it's always interesting in polling on Donald Trump in the state of Indiana is the favorability ratings tend to match the ballot test. They tend to be in sync. So if you look at the favorability rating that you had there was 54%, the ballot test for Donald Trump was 53%. Statistically, exactly the same. So if you approve of the president, you are more than likely to be casting your ballot in favor of him come November.
Brad Klopfenstein, let me get you in here. Anything in the numbers in the presidential race surprise you at all?
No, those numbers are about where I'd expect. He's not going to have a 19 or 20 point win in Indiana, but it's going to be a comfortable win. I was surprised last weekend. I was actually up at Lake Tippecanoe and we were watching some South Mid television. I was shocked to see ads for Joe Biden running. And then it occurred to me that a lot of their market spills into Michigan. So I don't think we're going to see any presidential commercials in central Indiana. And unless you're getting your television out of really Michigan or maybe Ohio, that's going to be a non-race in Indiana.
Let's go over to the favorability, unfavorability, which Pete had just mentioned. Donald Trump's favorability ratings is 54%, his unfavorability 44%, Joe Biden 36%, unfavorable 61%. Pete, let me go back to you again. So no big shocker that if you say you're going to vote for Donald Trump, you probably think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, precisely. And this has been consistent from day one, from when he was a candidate for the presidency and all throughout his presidency. And in fact, I don't think you polled favorability on Mike Pence. If you did, share it with us. But Mike Pence's favorability in the state of Indiana tends to track very closely with Donald Trump, despite the fact that, of course, Mike Pence was our governor for a full term. He's well known across the state of Indiana, but his fate politically when it comes to favorability ratings tends to be tied to his boss.
Kip, let me get your thoughts on Trump's favorability, unfavorability ratings, because it seems that he's actually doing better in Indiana than he does nationwide.
My only comment is it depresses me to know that there's that many people in the state of Indiana who thinks he's a decent human being, because I think he's a disgusting human being, but so be it.
Okay. Anything else you want to add there, my friend? Brad, let me get your thoughts on the favorability, unfavorability.
Somebody put something in Kip's Cheerios this morning. I think that's about what you'd expect, especially here in Indiana. I wish Jo Jorgensen would have been part of the poll, but I think she's probably going to come in at 6, 7, 8% in Indiana. But yeah, Trump is going to be just fine in Indiana, but this has always been one of his core states, so I would expect those numbers.
You're watching Indiana Issues, a weekly public affairs program where we talk about the issues facing the state of Indiana. Our guests today are Republican Pete Tew, Democrat Kip Tew, and our good friend Brad Klopfenstein of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. All right, gentlemen, in the race for governor, we got some interesting number here. As our polls show, at least for the moment in time, this is a much tighter race than what we polled earlier this spring. Jacob, we go ahead and throw those numbers up there. You can see Eric Holcomb at 36%, Woody Myers at 30%, Don Rainwater at 24%. Back in April, the governor was at 45%, at a 20-point lead, and Donald Rainwater was at 8%. Pete, I know you had some issues with the governor's race, so I'll let you go ahead and get those out of your way first.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to vent. Where do I start? I mean, these numbers are not even in the ballpark. You know, if the ballpark of polling were Victory Field here in downtown Indianapolis, these results, when it comes to the reality of what's happening on the ground, are in New York, if not in London. I mean, it's nowhere close to what we have been seeing in internal tracking numbers. Now, Eric Holcomb is not just 6 points ahead of Woody Myers. The gap is much wider than that. Nobody knows who Woody Myers is. He has no campaign cash. His social media strategy, from what I hear, is to slide into people's DMs and inundate them with messages to try and get them interested in his campaign because he has no money. The governor has an incredible list of accomplishments in his first term in office, and a really impressive list of endorsements. The National Rifle Association endorsed him this week. He's got the FOP, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, which did not get engaged in 2016. I mean, everything is pointing in the right direction. Now, on Change Research, let me add, this is a Democratic pollster. This is the official pollster of Pod Save America, which is run by a bunch of Barack Obama alumni. This pollster has a C- rating from 538.com. And as we have mentioned before, it's an online poll conducted entirely online. People are served ads that they have to click on. They have to opt into this poll. So likely you are getting people who are upset and have an axe to grind. And that's why they're clicking on this to share their opinions. I mean, I think we all agree you don't go online to tell people you're happy about something unless you're getting married or having a kid. Otherwise, you're on there to vent your frustrations.
Kip, let me get your thoughts on these numbers here, particularly the governor 36, Woody Myers 30, Don Rainwater 24.
I've got a lot of thoughts, but the first one is Pete thought the numbers were fine when they were the presidential numbers. It's the same poll for the gubernatorial numbers, so either they're both wrong or they're both right. And I would posit that they're both wrong. I've not seen any polling that indicates Don Rainwater with 24% of the vote. And I've not seen any race that show, or any polling numbers that show that the governor's race is 6 points, as a 6-point race at the moment. So I don't know what to think of this poll, other than I think that it may be an outlier, like I said earlier about the other thing. the presidential numbers. So that's sort of the top of the thing that I would say about it. I think this race is further apart. I would say I take issue with Pete saying that nobody knows who Woody Myers is. People do know. His name ID isn't as high as it should be at this point in the race, but he's going to get 40% of the vote in the state of Indiana at a minimum. And people will know him by election day, whether it's by direct messages into their social media account, or maybe everybody downloads TikTok before the Monday deadline when they're no longer allowed to have it.
Brad Klopfenstein, let me get yours. I'm assuming you have a little bit of a different perspective on the Don Rainwater numbers.
Let's hear it for the Rain Man. Kip, Pete, don't hate the player, hate the game. Yeah, that's interesting. Those are good results. And as has been discussed, if you're accepting the presidential results on this, you kind of got to accept the gubernatorial results. For anybody who watches the governor's weekly address online, if you look at the comments in his feed, it's a lot of Rainwater comments. Anytime he puts anything up, I think that there is an undercurrent there. And I understand that the crosstabs on this, Rainwater is pulling a lot of Trump supporters his direction, but interestingly, the governor is pulling in a lot of Biden supporters. I think this poll is pretty valid right now. Now, if the mask mandate goes away next week, it might change, but I think this is going to be a really interesting race.
Pete, let me ask you this, because one of the things that, because when we got the numbers from our pollster, we were like, what in the world? And so we went back and double checked the methodology in the whole 9 yards. So what we found was that a number of the people who supported the governor back in April, a number of them had left because of things like the mask mandate and the closing down of businesses. Shouldn't we take that into account as perhaps why in this number, Donald Rainwater is doing relatively well?
Well, I'm sure that some folks have shifted their allegiances and, as I said, are venting their frustrations. It's September, the election is in November, and people tend to come home when it's all on the line and when they actually have to cast that ballot. I think we are delusional to sit here and point to comments on social media, whether it be during the governor's virtual press conferences or on his posts on his Facebook pages, both on the official and the campaign site. It's great that 200 supporters of Don Rainwater have nothing better to do than to sit there and comment on these posts all day long. You know, that's why we conduct polls. We don't live in a world of anecdote. We live in a world of empirical data. And I go back to the reality of, you know, fair point. You believe one poll here and don't believe the other one, but it goes back to what I said about people being frustrated. Angry, frustrated voters tend to support Donald Trump in the state of Indiana. And these folks who are seeing these ads, who are being serviced these ads, whether it's on social media or news websites, you'd have to enlighten us on that, Abdul, are more than likely to click to opt in. I don't know that I've gotten polls via telephone that I've taken over the years. I've never done one online. I've never seen one online that I'm aware of. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't click on it. But the folks who are angry and frustrated and want to vent those frustrations while they're online scrolling through social media are going to click. They're not going to wait, and they're going to share their opinions. And I think that's why these numbers are skewed in the direction that they're skewed.
Abdul, that was a long-winded response by Pete. I know he's trying to filibuster the rest of this thing about it. But two things that stand out to me. I think I heard Pete Seat just say he believes in climate science because he says we need to follow empirical data, and all the data is that climate change is real. So I'm glad to finally have you and the rest of your, maybe you can bring some more of your party members on board to help us with climate science. And the second thing I wanted to point out is that there is something happening here. I don't entirely dismiss the notion that Don Rainwater is getting some Holcomb support. Jim Lucas, a sitting state representative in the Republican Party, has endorsed Don Rainwater and has run away from his party leadership here to not endorse Eric Holcomb. So there's something happening there. And if Jim Lucas does represent a certain wing of the Republican Party, I'll leave that up to y'all to decide how to characterize that wing of the Republican Party. But there's definitely something happening here. Whether in the end of the day it's going to amount to 24% of the vote, I'll take the under.
Brad, I want to give you the last word before we take our break here.
So I do have to say, Pete is right that the angry voters support Trump, but you can't have it both ways. If voters are angry and they're supporting Trump, but they're angry and not supporting Holcomb, that doesn't mesh. So I think if they're angry, we'll see how much that anger spills over, but this is going to be a real interesting race.
There's a lot of angry Democrats, let me assure you.
Sounds like you're one of those today, Kip.
Yes.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of Indy Politics. We're going to take us a quick break, come back, look at some numbers in the race for Attorney General, and also some Hoosier attitudes regarding COVID-19. You're watching Indiana Issues. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Our political panel today is Republican Pete Tew, Democrat Kip Tew, and our good friend Brad Klopfenstein from the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. Gentlemen, we've been walking through some polling today. I want to switch over to the race for Indiana Attorney General. In this survey of 1,033 likely voters, 3.1% margin of error, done by Indy Politics and Change Research. Todd Rokita was 49%, Jonathan Weinzapfel 38%, and 18% undecided. Pete, let me start with you. Your thoughts on Todd Rokita, Jonathan Weinzapfel, and that 18% undecided.
Well, that's not surprising considering the candidates haven't been on air yet. And unlike Todd Rokita, Jonathan Weinzapfel is not known statewide. Todd Rokita has run statewide and won twice. But look, unless lightning strikes for Jonathan Weinzapfel, he will not win this race. He started with $1 million cash advantage because he comes from the Evan Bayh school of hoarding campaign funds and waiting for the next campaign to lose. But Todd Rokita has been able to, if not match, exceed that that cash haul in a relatively short amount of time. And I think he is going to easily run away with this. I'm also seeing it across the state as I travel to events near and far that the Republican Party faithful, after a contentious and emotional convention battle, has come home to Todd Rokita very, very quickly. And it helps that they already knew him and know that he will be a great attorney general.
Kip, let me get your thoughts on the Rokita-Weinzapfel race, because Weinzapfel did have a lot of money in the beginning. Could we expect him to start maybe spending some of it to drive up that name ID? Your thoughts?
Without a doubt. I mean, he's been saving his money for the last month when people are going to decide the race. I'm just kind of curious as to where Luke Messer is going to be in this attorney general's race, and some other Republicans. I know it's Pete Seat's job to paint a rosy picture that the Republicans are all singing, kumbaya with their attorney general nominee. But Todd Rokita is a very divisive guy inside his own party. I expect if this race gets close, that Jonathan Weinzapfel has a chance to win it. He's a very good candidate. He knows how to run a professional campaign. He's obviously a former two-term mayor of Evansville and a state representative. He's run races before. He knows what he's doing, and he's putting himself in a position to be able to win this race.
Brad, let me get your thoughts on that 18% undecided.
Well, 18% undecided, that tells me that nobody cares, or they care very little. I don't know. I think that this is the marquee races are going to be governor. They're going to be president. You might have the 5th district congressional race. This is going to be one where this is going to be by and large straight ticket voting, unless Rokita does something dumb like try to remove a moderator from a debate, and that might end up hurting him in the long run.
We'll see, my friend. Quick question, gentlemen. I just got a tweet across my computer screen here. Jennifer McCormick, Republican Secretary of State, Superintendent of Public Instruction, just endorsed Woody Myers for governor. She's endorsed a number of Democrats. Jim Lucas endorsing the Libertarian. You got Republicans, Democrats switching over, and I want to say Lake and Vandenberg County switching over to Republicans. Any idea what's going on here, or is this just a weird year?
Scott Newman endorsed Joe Biden. I want to throw that in. Scott Newman, who was a two-term Marion County prosecutor, worked in the Attorney General's office, worked for Mayor Ballard as public safety director, has endorsed Joe Biden. So that's one other person I think that you ought to put on the list. And I think it was actually one of the more significant things because he's been a lifelong Republican and he's done with President Trump. And I think it's because we're having a realignment. We're in the middle of a realignment. We don't know exactly what the long-term is going to look like, but the Republican Party of Donald Trump is not the Republican Party of George W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, Richard Nixon, or Ronald Reagan. It's a completely different party. It doesn't stand for the same things that those men stood for. It's been completely transformed, and so you're seeing people leave it. And Democratic Party isn't the same party that it was when Bill Clinton was president. And so you're seeing some people join it and other people leaving it.
Pete, let me get your thoughts on this sort of, like Kip said, sort of this realignment with Jennifer McCormick endorsing Woody Myers. Like I said, Democrats switching over to Republicans, Jim Lucas switching over and endorsing Don Rainwater.
Yeah, 2020 is quite the year, not just in politics, but just generally in life. But as you mentioned, you've got two formerly Democrat sheriffs, a mayor and a town council president, who are all Democrats, came to the Republican Party in recent weeks because of what they're seeing happen on the national level and this leftward lurch from the National Democratic Party that they are fearful of. I think with Dr. Jennifer McCormick, you'll know I did not say Republican in front of her name, and I wish the media would stop putting that in front of her name because she's not. Whether it's sour grapes or the fact that she's not actually a Republican, she is throwing what little weight she has around politically and just being a rabble rouser, quite frankly. It's unfortunate to see. She had a lot of promise and decided to butt heads with everybody around rather than be effective. And on her way out the door, is trying to get some headlines. It's unfortunate to see, but in the end, it will not matter one iota.
Brad, let me get your thoughts on this sort of looks like a somewhat of a change in our political playbook.
I think that we are seeing a reshuffling of the deck, and a lot of this is the Donald Trump factor. I mean, he was conveniently a Republican, but any Republicans who thought the Republican Party stood for smaller constitutional government, Trump has blown that apart. So I think that you're seeing people finding new political homes, and it's going to be interesting to see where we are 2 years from now, 4 years from now, just because what people thought were their political homes might not necessarily philosophically align with their beliefs.
Speaking of beliefs, I want to get and put up our next set of poll numbers here. We've got about 5 minutes left on the program. It's the approval, disapproval ratings of the government and COVID-19. As you can see, the federal, state, city, county government, and schools, out of our polls that we surveyed, looks like only city, county government, just sort of barely gets ahead. of that disapproval rating. And also, Jake, let's go to the next one on the mask mandate, if we could. 40% strongly somewhat approved, 36% strongly somewhat disapprove. Kip, let me ask you, what does this tell you about the mask mandate and how folks think the local governments and state governments are doing?
Well, it's interesting that the poll shows an approval rating for Donald Trump and at 54%, but think the federal government's response to COVID is not good. To me, that's an interesting dichotomy of thought, because the president's in charge of the federal government and he's the one that's been in charge of the COVID response. They don't approve of it, so maybe they don't think that COVID's the most important issue out there. I happen to think that all the other polling I've seen gives an opposite response to that. I'm glad to see that the mask mandate has more approval than disapproval. Hopefully, it'll lead to the governor not caving like he did on early vote, caving to Donald Trump's stupid distinction without a difference between absentee and early voting, or vote by mail. I apologize. The governor in that instance, rather than do the right thing, which is what he did in the primary by saying no fault absentee, vote by mail, it's okay in the fall, because of all the pressure from Trump, he has this sophistry about go ahead and mark one of the 12 reasons, which is just stupid. But hopefully this poll will give him the impetus to continue with the mask mandate, because as Pete said earlier, data and science shows that the masks work, they save lives, they are important. It's the only thing that's going to drive down this virus. So I really hope that the governor stands up for what is right in this instance, and also looks at the polling and does the right thing.
Pete, let me get your thoughts on the state government and the approval of the mask mandate.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll keep it short, maybe not as short as Kip's response to the president's approval ratings, but short nonetheless. Feelings drive a lot of political perception, and pollsters tend to ask voters, respondents, how they feel about issues. And so I wonder, I've not seen exactly how this question with the mask requirement was phrased, Abdul, but it strikes me as likely asking about feelings as opposed to whether or not you believe wearing a mask is necessary, because that's a different thing. A lot of us don't like wearing masks, but we understand that it is necessary for the public health to wear those masks. So it can skew the results slightly as a result of that. And I'll just add one more thing, Kip, on a couple of these things you've mentioned today. I think you just need to read my columns more often and you'll have a better idea of where I stand.
All right, Brad Klopfenstein. And Brad, I'll give you the last word on this.
Sure. Earlier, we talked about the reshuffling of the political parties. Anymore, it's not abortion. It's not concealed carry and where you stand on the Second Amendment. There are two parties, the maskers and the anti-maskers, and that's what this election is coming down to.
Gentlemen, before we wrap up here, we got a couple minutes left here, so I want to get your predictions and prognostications, or let our audience know any particular story or idea or thing that you're looking at. Pete, we'll start with you.
Well, the last time I was on the show with you, I predicted that Major League Baseball would not take the field this calendar year. So my prediction this time is that for the first time in 15 years, I will not attend a World Series game in person. My hope is in saying that, I will end up being as wrong as I was about the last prediction.
Kip, your thoughts, my friend. Predictions, prognostication, anything you're paying attention to?
Sorry, I forgot the unmute button. I would say that some of the most interesting things out there, look at the 4 suburban House of Representative districts here in the state of Indiana, right outside of Indianapolis. Those are going to be very, very close election night, going to surprise some people, I believe.
Brad Klopfenstein, I'll give you the last word, my friend.
All right. I'm watching the governor's race. I think this one's going to be fun, and I think it's going to be pretty polarizing. And just based on where everybody's shuffling out, that one could be real interesting in a 3-way race.
All righty. Where our guests today, ladies and gentlemen, have been Pete Seat, Kip Tew, and Brad Klopfenstein. Thank you all very much for being with us. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. You've been watching Indiana Issues. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.